Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the July edition of Molten Music Monthly. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why on earth is he still kicking these things off with that terribly old, tired title screen where he's doing news and reviews and audio PCs? I haven't built an audio PC in years. So I promise this summer I will sort that out and it will be new and fresh and exciting. You'll go, oh wow, this is a reinvention of something. But anyway, I also should apologise ahead of time because I've split my lip. I was away camping this weekend, having a lovely time. The surf and the sun of Lowestoft Beach was bearing down and I just chapped my lips. So I'm not really able to smile or enthuse quite as I'd like to. Although inevitably I will. But if I start bleeding, I do apologise. But anyway, such is the summer, such is the life. Let's get on with things. So Reco-Synth pulls off a drum machine and invites us to enter the Matrix. Elk Live might actually be working. SOMA Labs ponders Reflex and engages with Enner. Cherry Audio takes on the mother of all polysynths. PreSonus has a jaunty new audio interface. Reco-Synth offers up the Mutuca and a new rack for beginners. Korg sets wavetables in motion with the Modwave. MOTU hits version 11 with Digital Performer. Artisan Instruments tempts us with the Nucleus. Create Audio introduces us to Capt'n Big-O and Mr. Filter. See, that's me not smiling. Can't smile. Bragi Modular crosses the permafrost with Heimdall. Heimdall? I don't know. The Rhodes is back. Polycinematic is making pads in Modular. Wavefonix has the perfect, complete modular system for modular newbies. G-Storm pulls the filter out of the SH5. Behringer does some stuff. Noise Engineering is giving away some trippy new plugins. And Rebel Technology releases The Witch. But first, you may recall me talking about Strombox. This is a new Euro-Rack enclosure builder, maker, manufacturer in the UK who recently released a whole sort of modular system of putting together Euro-Rack cases. It's pretty awesome. They sent me one to try it. I did a video on it. It looks a bit like that, or at least part of it does. But the point being that you can start with a single row and then go to bigger rows and more. That kind of thing. It's both DIY and fully assembled. Very, very configurable and modular, as I say. Anyway, I've been in touch with them ever since because I've just been sort of finishing off my bit. I wanted to add another row and bits and pieces. And we've been talking about it. And they've made quite a monumental decision to quite massively lower their prices. I mean, it's always difficult when you're entering into a market that you've not been in before. I mean, the people behind Strombox are actually in the business of making picture frames, and this is sort of a sideline and an interest for them. But whenever you enter a new market, it's difficult to know exactly how to price yourself. And so they had a go. They sort of aimed somewhere in the middle ground between the Dofa boxes and the more expensive posher Euro-Rack boxes, and they've come to the decision after a lot of customer feedback and thought and navel gazing that perhaps they could enter in a little bit lower. And so in a remarkable unbusinesslike business decision, they've taken like 30% off all their prices. And I felt that was definitely worth a mention. So if you've looked at their stuff and thought, oh, I don't know, it's a little bit out of my range, I would recommend looking again. Because I think you'll find that they do some remarkable cases, some nice, good-looking, solid, boxy cases for now some really, really affordable prices. Reco-Synths and Sonic Potions have got together to create the LXR-02 desktop synthesizer drum machine thing. This is the evolution or the next version of the LXR that Sonic Potions did many, many, many years ago. And they've got together with Reco-Synths to give it a little bit of ballast and a rethink and a refit. And what they have at the end of the day is a 6-channel drum synthesizer. You've got 3 voices in there based around kind of a skin slappy type synthesis, and other 3 voices based on subtractic synthesis. You've also got FM in there and noise and hi-hats and other bits and pieces which you can blend together to create the kit of your choice. It's then got an 808 style programming interface with level control over each of the channels, and you can run patterns up to 128 steps. One of the neat functions is that you have this ability to morph between the kits, so you can load up different kits on an SD card or save them to an SD card and then morph between them mid-performance. You've got a lot of modulation inside, including an LFO for each voice, an envelope generator and a transient generator. You can even use things like velocity to modulate whatever parameters you like within the synthesizer. You've got effects like distortion, delay, remodulation, all that loveliness packed into a small little fun desktop live performance. Drop in your fills and your ratchets and accents as you go. Fun-filled drum machine. It's not particularly stunning to look at, but it is, or looks like, a lot of fun to play with. Talking of stunning to look at though, the other thing that Reco-Synths have going this month is the Matrix mixer. Now this is a fun thing. This is an extraordinary thing. I've got one here, I've been playing with it, I did a video on it. Look, it's all there, all glowy. And the basic idea is that you've got 16 ins and you've got 16 outs, in between which you have a matrix that allows you to make connections between any input to any number of outputs. It's sort of like a modulation matrix you would find on a synthesizer like the Putney synthesizer or the Matrix Brute or their own Syntrix synthesizer, which is essentially where this comes from. It's digital, so you've got a couple of encoders that you're moving this dot around and then hitting a button in order to make the connection. What is it for? Well, it's for whatever you want. This is the thing. People can ask me questions. Oh, could I do this? Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want. It just routes inputs to outputs. You could see it as a bit of an extraordinary mulch, 1 in, 16 out. Or you could see it as a mixer. You can mix waveforms together, either audio or CV, and then route them to various destinations. I mean, I've used it for routing out to different effects, so I can set up effects chains within it. Going out, coming back in onto another channel, and then swapping between which oscillators or what sound sources are going to those effects and back again. Because the wonderful thing about it is, because it's digital, you can save patterns. So you save a configuration and then you can swap between them on the touch of a button, meaning you can go from all effects being on to all effects being off, or to route into a sequence to one oscillator to route into another sequence, or you can add voltage to a sequence to do transposition. You can do that, and because it's 16 by 16, there's loads of room for doing 4 LFOs in here, going to different destinations and swapping between them, while at the same time combining a bunch of waveforms to do other modulations while routing audio through and back out again. There's lots and lots and lots you can do with it. Now, it's not perfect. It doesn't have everything that everybody wants. Everybody wants everything in every product, and that's difficult. It's actually a relatively simple product that doesn't solve every question that your rack is asking, but it does provide a completely different way of routing things within your rack, which for me, from my point of view, completely changed how I thought about routing, completely changed how I used effects. Usually I go, oscillator through a filter, to a VCA, to an effect, to the output. Whereas now I can go oscillator to a choice of filters without having to physically repatch all the time. And it encouraged me to try those things out, to be more experimental, to do a routing this way and then swap it around. So it's a lot of fun. It makes you think really hard about what you're doing, and it results in a whole load of spaghetti all over the place. But then that's what we like, I think. Now, do you remember Elk Audio? Elk Audio was this... I've talked about it a lot over the time. They were kind of this platform for... They had this audio OS that I thought was going to be awesome. It's going to run something at hyper speed within small boxes. You could run it in anything. You could make a Euro-Reco module that runs all this stuff, and it can run VST plugins or not, or something. And it never seemed to quite find exactly what it is that it wanted to do. And then they discovered that they might be able to use it to do very low latency audio over the internet. And that became very interesting, about sort of a year to 18 months ago when we were all stuck at home going, how are we going to do anything? So they produced this thing called Elk Aloha, that's what hello I suppose that means, which was some kind of box that fitted into your router or bypassed your router or something to do with your internet router that allowed you to send audio at super high speed to somebody else so you could collaborate in real time over the internet. Now I kept poking them to say, you need to show us a product. What is it that you're doing? Because we don't get it. You just seem to be producing these well-made videos of these musicians jamming together with no reality to it, no showing us how the magic was actually happening, because we keep seeing companies coming up with things going, oh yeah, real-time collaboration online, no problem, and then it's a lie. It doesn't actually work because there's massive latencies involved in trying to stay in synchronization with one another. It's very, very difficult to do. The technology just doesn't exist. The speed of the internet is such that it can't really happen. So when they kept saying, oh yeah, but we're doing it, look, I've got a drummer here and a saxophone player here playing together, you go, well, that's all very well, it looks like that's happening, but how do we know? You know, you've not provided any product, anything that we can look at and go, oh, okay, so this goes in here, okay, and that's how that works. Great. Finally, they seem to be here. Now, I know the pandemic's over and we're all getting back together again now, so it's a little bit of a moot point maybe. But no. But let's hold on to this idea that we can still find usefulness in collaborating online with one another. And perhaps the newly named Elk Live is the thing that we've been waiting for in order to make this happen. So now, finally, we have a box. It's a yellow box. It's got Elk written on it. It looks good. What does the box do? The box acts as an audio interface that plugs directly into your router, into the internet, and directly into your audio equipment. The idea being that the software inside and the interface is so low latency that you can route direct connection over to somebody else on the internet and have it at near zero latency. A playable latency, the sort of latency where you can have musicians playing together and they can stay in time. They can be playing to a click track. They can be playing to each other and that actually working. I mean, obviously it depends on where you are. If you are completely the other side of the world, then maybe that's not going to work quite as well as someone who's perhaps 100 miles away, or 200 miles away, 50 miles away, in the room next door. You know, there's lots of different applications for it. So there are three important elements to Elk Live. You've got the box, a hardware interface that gives you the network connection and your audio inputs. You need to be going directly into this box rather than through your computer first, I suppose, ideally. And then you've got the OS that's running on that box, which does the super fast transfer of audio into network protocols over the what's-it. And then you've got an app with which you can control stuff, that you sync up video so you can communicate with each other with your other people at the other end. The other person that you're collaborating with also needs an Elk Live box in order to make that connection happen. Now, Elk Audio talk about the latency of the internet, and of course that is always going to be a factor, but they suggest that up to 1,000 kilometers, which is pretty good, will give you about 10 milliseconds. Now 10 milliseconds is what I generally call playable latency. If you're playing a virtual instrument on a computer that's reporting 10 milliseconds of buffering, of latency, that feels okay to play, in my view. To other people, no, that's rubbish. You can't possibly ever work like that. Good Lord, how ridiculous. But for me personally, that sounds and feels all right. So by all accounts, the technology that's running inside this little box really could enable some proper online jamming and musical collaborations and performances, the sort of which we've never really seen before. So this could be everything that they promised it would be. It's just a shame it wasn't 18 months ago. But anyway, it's still a fascinating technology and could really work for a whole number of reasons and a whole number of different scenarios. Now, Vlad Krimer at SOMA Labs is always coming up with something nuts, crazy, wonderfully inventive and awesome, and he had a little bit of video out on something called Reflex. Now, it wasn't entirely clear exactly what he was doing, but he has this big PCB, which is this 6-voice polyphonic synthesizer thing, and he had a keyboard plugged into it, but he had one hand sort of draped over the PCB, and there appears to be some pads or touch pads or something going on that he's interacting with. And the idea is that it's a synthesizer that all of the parameters are controlled via your touch. You get your fingers in there and it starts to evolve and change, and all of the patching, all of the creation and sound generation is purely through the manipulation of your hand onto the space on this PCB. So the idea is that you're kind of inside fingering the synthesis, that you become the synthesizer. You're not doing filters and then patching something else and then putting in some modulation. You're finding sounds through the movement of your fingers and the stuff going on. It's like manipulating an instrument. It's like picking up a guitar and screaming out guitar solos and then dropping to crunchy chords and then clean chords and then harmonics. You know, it's pulling all sorts of sounds and possibilities out of an electronic experience. It's very, very, very interesting. I love what SOMA Labs do. One day I will have something of theirs. One day. And so, kind of in a similar way, they've come up with something called Enner, which similarly works with touch. It uses touch pads and the natural capacitance resistance, I don't know, something to do with your body that gets in the way and creates the patch between different things, and your body is also modulating the control signals that go from one thing to another. It's a lovely looking thing. It's kind of almost like it's somehow there's something very fleshy about it, and you find noises through an array of different filters and making more traditional, I suppose, synthesizer connections within it, but by dragging your fingers through all sorts of different places and making those connections by placing your fingers on it. It very much feeds into this idea of touch and using yourself within the instrument while using more traditional forms of synthesis, and so you kind of understand what it is that's going on. But ultimately you're making noises and glitches and drones and tones and weirdness, and it's the sort of thing you can just sit and play with. Now, Cherry Audio have been producing some amazing software emulations recently, and their last one kicked off with a teaser campaign that says, we're going to do like the Memorymode, right? But don't tell anyone, it's a secret. And so then about a week later they did they did the Memorymode, which they're calling, I don't know, what are they calling it? Oh, they're calling it the Memorymode. Memorymode. See what they did there? Yeah, is that clever? Oh, I don't know. But essentially the Memorymode is this awesome legendary polyphonic synthesizer, analog polyphonic synthesizer, that really pushed the boundaries of what polyphonic synthesis could do and could sound like, and is probably regarded as one of the most legendary polyphonic synthesizers ever made. And this is a little software version of it for a handful of dollars, and they used a vintage Memorymode owned by Chick Corea, I think it was, jazz pianist or something, in which to model all of the circuitry and all of the sounds. They've even pulled in all the original presets, as well as building on a whole library of their own. You've got 16 voices, you've got selectable filters, you've got MPE control, you've got some distortion and overdrive, and it has all sorts of instability and crappiness built in, as we like with our vintage synths, but you can also turn all that off and make it sound really rather nice, rather than kind of grungy and on its last legs. But the choice is yours, which I think is the point. So yeah, nice. Cherry Audio are doing really great work, I think, with their range of synthesizers, and I hope there's more interesting things to come. PreSonus have launched a new and rather dashing audio interface called the IO24, which is a little bit misleading because it kind of gives the idea that there's 24 inputs or 24 outputs, or lots of inputs and outputs anyway, but really it's 2 in, 4 out. So it's a little one. But what's interesting about it is that it has this strange rake, which I think is a good rake. I like a rake. I dislike the standard sort of 1U audio interfaces because they're fiddly and the front panel is like really close to the desk and difficult to get to. Whereas what PreSonus have done is gone and given it a bit of a slope so that it sits on your desk and you can much more easily get to those controls and plug things in. Why aren't other people doing this? I mean, that's why I like a desktop interface that has things on the top. That makes so much more sense than having everything on this little thing on the front. So straight out of the gate, I think they're on to a winner. It's just a shame that it's only got a few in, 2 in and 4 out at most. Because I feel that audio interfaces should always be more like 4 in. I don't care about outputs. Who needs outputs? I don't want outputs particularly, but inputs for recording stuff, 4. I always need at least 4, I think. So I can just plug a guitar in and a mic, and I've already got a synth or an output from something running through somewhere else. That's generally what I need. But who cares about my needs? This is the PreSonus Revelator, I should add. That's before the IO24. It's called the Revelator. So, this is a new thing. This is not the same as some of their other stuff. This is potentially a new range of audio interfaces, I suppose. But what's interesting about it, other than the fact it has a slightly slopey front? Well, it has a rather nice display front panel, nice knob on there, some good metering. It has internal loopback ability to recapture something like podcasting, and podcasting is actually what this is probably aimed at, because it also has some DSP effects built in order to run the microphone preamps inside to give it kind of an instant live performance, broadcasting over podcasting kind of, but with some audio processing in there to make it sound better than average, better than other things. You can save your configuration, so you can have your podcast set up and your home studio set up and just switch between them at the press of a button, which is rather nice. So it's kind of well thought out. I like that. I like thought being put into audio interfaces, because they tend to be a bit utility, and as soon as you think about it a little bit and how people actually use these things, then manufacturers can actually make them, fundamentally better, because they're often basic. And it's really good to see someone just put in a little bit extra to give you a little bit more to make it more usable. And looking at it again, it's only 2 in, 2 out. So where does a 4 come in? What's the 4 about? Does anybody know? Does the 4 mean for the internal loopback thing? I don't know. So light on inputs and outputs, but heavy on other decent features. I'd like to see a slightly bigger one. Now, my favourite Brazilian synthesizer maker, Arthur Jolly of Reco-Synth, has another little thing out. I love this stuff. It's just fantastic. This one's called the Mutuca, I think it is, which is simply a gorgeous looking monosynth. There's not a whole lot to it. It's got a single 3340 3-wave oscillator, single LFO, single envelope, single filter. Just the basics, but built into this gorgeous little synthesizer case with a VU meter, nice glowy light, and this button keyboard on the front. So not velocity sensitive, just button keyboards for playing bass lines. It's glorious. It's lovely. I love it. Every time I think that this industry is all going downhill or going mass market or going crazy, then something like the Mutuca comes along and just reminds me that synthesizers are awesome. They can look awesome, they can sound awesome, they can be hand built brilliantly and perfectly, and absolutely bring a joy of sound and exploration to every corner of your little life. Now, I've been chatting to Arthur a little bit lately, and I really have no concept of what his setup is like, his synthesizer studio or laboratory or workshop is like. I have no clue. I just see the cool things that he does and go, wow, that's fantastic. And I assume that he builds these things to order and delivers them to synthesizer enthusiasts the world over. But he's actually just a really small operation, knocking out half a dozen synths every now and again in little ideas and little things that he puts together, and he's working sort of really hard to establish the Reco-Synth brand as something that he can push forward more into international markets, because it's hard in Brazil. They don't have access to all the same things that we do over here, and then you've got to deal with the problems associated with international shipping. But I think he's doing a marvellous job, and I love what he does, and I hope he continues to push that envelope and that his stuff becomes more generally available. The other thing he's also releasing is the Euro-Reco 2021, which seems to be a new version, I think, of like a basic Euro-Rack system. You've got 3 oscillators and then a filter with 3 inputs that you can mix everything in through a single VCA envelope, and modulation and bits and pieces, all in this really weirdly designed case, and it comes complete with an Arturia key step. So it's ready to go as a 3 oscillator, patchable, completely modular monosynth. Fantastic. Looks amazing. And it's about £1,000, which is about right for, you know, a small, compact, half decent Euro-Rack system. Fantastic. So he's built a bunch of these that are going to be for the Brazilian market, and then he's hoping, if it all works out all right, to be able to push these into a more international frame, which is great. So keep your eye on it. Go and follow them on Instagram, because they're always releasing fantastic photos of fantastic hand-built boutique synthesizers, which just are fantastic. Now, we saw the Modwave way back in NAMM time, I think. Was that this year or even last year? Don't quite remember. Anyway, what's the Modwave? Well, it's a smallish synthesizer done in the same form factor as the Wavestate and the Op6, but this is a wavetable synthesizer. It's a great wavetable synthesizer. I've had one for quite a while. I had the opportunity to review it, and there's a video out there if you want to see my review on it, where I think I got down to the nuts and bolts of it. I don't think I captured absolutely everything, but you know, for the most part, I think I got the hang of it. What you've got is it's a two-layer synthesizer, so you kind of got two synthesizers sitting on top. All of these wavetables that you can pull in and morph and change, alongside a whole bunch of PCM samples that you can add to it in order to, I don't know, give it a little bit of ballast. And you've got two oscillators running which can both do the same thing, although one can also feed into the other for a bit of FM and bits and pieces, and you can create these wonderfully moving sounds. Not just through the morphing and the modulation that you'd find on any wavetable synth. No, you've then got a motion sequencer where every step is changing the modulation that can be going on. You can have things going forwards and backwards of different parameters, different motion lanes that are moving either pitch or modulation or filter or any other parameter you can think of. You can step through and throw it envelopes, throw it LFOs, throw it all sorts of different values. So you've got all of that stuff timed together going on as soon as you press a key. You've got all this movement, all this stuff, this aggravation, I was going to say. Well, it can be all this stuff going on. And then on top of that, you have this performance pad, this chaos pad, which has a physics engine that allows you to ping this thing around, a little XY pad, and that will rattle around and create other movement and other modulations between different points on that pad. It just moves. It loves movement. You can create these incredible pads that change and evolve and have textures and arpeggiators within them, as well as then moving them about with just a little flick of your finger, or setting something in motion which continues forever. It's a great little synthesizer, a really good little synthesizer. It's a bit plastic, I suppose, in places, and it doesn't have aftertouch or a posh keyboard. It's just a rough, ready, lightweight, plastic, fun, evolving synthesizer that you can have a lot of fun with. Digital Performer from MOTU reaches version 11. Now, I really tried hard to have a look at this when it hit version 10, and I just never found the time. But now it's at version 11, and I still don't know a whole lot about it, other than Digital Performer has been around forever. And it's one of those kind of alternative doors. It's never quite sat in the middle like Logic has or Pro Tools has or Cubase. It's always been an alternative, always been a little bit over to the side, but with undoubtedly a devoted fan base. A lot of the new features are kind of catch-up things like MPE support, articulation support, and retrospective recording, but also for audio as well as MIDI, which is quite interesting. They've redesigned the Nano Sampler plugin to give it more stuff, and their new clip interface that came in version 10, I think, is now compatible with more Ableton Live controllers for clip launching and all that kind of performance-based stuff. I'm not going to pretend I know a whole lot more about it than that, other than to say that if you're in the market for a new DAW or want to try something different, then do go and check it out, and then let me know what you think. Artisan Electronic Instruments have revealed a prototype of what they're calling an analog hybrid synthesizer. It's a interesting looking, quite dated looking, to be honest, desktop synthesizer that incorporates two oscillators of analog synthesis with a third oscillator that supports wavetables and Kepler strong and noise and swarm oscillations. It is packed with LFOs, it's packed with envelopes, and so they're really looking at spinning it into a mass of modulation opportunities. And the idea is that you can pretty much use any any source within the synthesizer as a modulation source for anything else. It's quite neat and solid looking, and they've also sort of tempting us with the idea of a polyphonic version where they would use the voice card that's inside the Nucleus and pump a load of those together to create a more of a polyphonic synthesizer, which I think perhaps potentially could be more interesting. And then it sort of becomes a Korg prologue where you've got a couple of analog oscillators and then a potentially a digital one after that. That, I think, if they're able to get there, would be a more interesting place to go. New in from Create Audio is the Capt'n Big O VCO and the Mr. Filter. Oh, they're such crazy guys. They are crazy guys. Now, I have a couple of these and I've done videos on them, so you'll find those in the channel, my full review of the VCO and the filter thingy. So do go and check those out. But in a nutshell, what you've got in the Capt'n Big O is a bizarrely named, very, very capable voltage controlled oscillator with multiple waveforms and FM inputs and all the usual kind of crap you get with a Euro-Reco oscillator. But this also has a wave folding circuit built in, which is really nice, so you can turn those sine waves into other crazy things. And then it also has a drive circuit built in, and then it also has a drive circuit built in, so you can patch the output of the wavefolder into the drive, because, well, I mean, why wouldn't you? And then take that as an output, so you have an enormous range of possible sounds out of this single oscillator while it's sitting there looking weird with this chap's face on it, and you're thinking, what on earth is this about? Oh, well, it sounds really, ooh, yeah. And there's lots of interesting things you can do with the wavefolding and the drive in order to create a lot of different sounds and textures out of that thing. It's a lot of fun to play with. Even the FM is fun to play with, and I don't say that very often. And the Big O was actually designed by Richard at Pittsburgh Modular. So Create Audio have kind of brought in a little bit of experience, a little bit of expertise to throw at these new modules of those, which is brilliant. It's really good because Create Audio are doing something which is really affordable, really good quality, and could set people up as a good starting point for their modular journey. The other one, the Mr. Filter, is actually more than a filter. It is a filter, a ladder filter in there, but you've also got a VCA and an envelope. And an envelope that can be split into two, into slow, into fast, so you can run the filter and the VCA at the same time, giving you kind of the back end of an entire voice. So with the VCO and the Mr. Filter, you've got an entire synth voice stuck together there that you can play from a keyboard or trigger from a sequencer or whatever. And the filter sounds nice. Yeah, it's good, it's nice. The envelope is terribly, terribly simple. You haven't got a whole lot of options going on there, but it has enough to do the normal synth voicing thing that you would want to do. And these things are really, really affordable. And so they're awesome. Go and check out my videos on them. I had a good time with them. And now that they are released and available, they will find their place in my rack at some point. Now, Viking-inspired Bragi Modular has another module out. I think this is the second one so far in their range of Viking modules. And this is an 8-step modulation sequencer that they're calling Heimdall. Heimdall, I think it is. It's the guy who protects the thermofrost. It's Idris Elba's guy with the big sword, I think. You see how much we know about Norse mythology.
Heimdallur. Heimdallur. The double L in Icelandic sound k, so Heimdallur.
This module, whatever it's called,
Heimdallur,
is interesting because sequencers are usually generally thrown towards pitch. I'm going to do a pitch sequence, I'm going to sequence notes, when this is not really the vibe of this. This is more designed for modulation, so you'd throw this into the cutoff of a filter in order to create interesting bubbly sounds, or you'd poke it into something else to create different control voltages in order to control something to create interesting sounds. There's no reason you can't run it through a quantizer and use it for pitch, but I just find it interesting that they've kind of pushing this much more towards a modulation space rather than a pitch sequencing space. And I wonder whether could that be because they weren't able to make it accurate enough to do pitch, or is it just because they've got another vibe and another thought and think that this is a place that's underserved at this time? I don't know. It's just interesting, and I'm going with it. But it's simple, it looks nice, you can wind it between 3 and 8 notes, and if you plug some order rate modulation into the trigger, it will turn into a sub-oscillator. Apparently. I don't know. Rhodes is back. Yeah, I know. Rhodes, like Rhodes pianos, like Fender Rhodes, like Fender Rhodes suitcases, like Rhodes electric pianos, that sound which we know instinctively and just go straight to the heart. There's something about that tinkly, tiny, teeny, tiny, that sound of things being hammered, that twinkling. There's something in the soul of us that resonates with the soul of that instrument. Something about it. Something about that sound, that electric piano sound, that just resonates and fills us full of joy and life and sadness. There's something iconic about the electric piano that I think is undescribable. I've always loved that sound. It's the sound I always go to whenever I'm playing with synthesizers on a computer. I always end up with that kind of sound. Give me a sustain pedal and an electric piano, and I'm as happy as Larry I am. And I've never had anything decent, never had a decent electric piano, and I've always wanted one. It's like the Korg, the SV1 and the SV2, fantastic. Those are the sort of things that I've been dying to have. One of these days I will have such a piano. But the fact that Rhodes are back makes me think, hold on, they could produce something awesome. I mean, in the past they produced the most fantastic looking instruments, iconic in of themselves, the way that they look as well as the way that they sound, extraordinary. Mechanical electric pianos, somehow just amazing. And I'm just tickled pink. They're back in some way. So I don't know, the Rhodes name has been purchased by a UK firm. They're calling themselves the Rhodes Music Group Limited, and they plan apparently to continue the high quality musical instrument design that Rhodes and Fender Rhodes are famous for. It could be fantastic. I don't know really anything more about it than that, other than they've said they plan to just produce awesome instruments. I hope they do. I hope it's fantastically moulded in some strange futuristic material and is bright orange or bright red or bright green or weird or made of Tolex or not. I just don't want it to be mediocre. Do you know what I mean? It has to be awesome. Now, the Polycinematic is a beautiful module from a company calling themselves Knobula. Here it is. This is one of the prototypes. It's beautiful. I mean, just to look at. What a great job. What a great design. Now, I haven't plugged this in yet. It's the thing I'm doing after I've finished this. I have an obligation to all of you people out there to produce my Molten Monthly, when really I should be playing with this fella. But I'll get to this as soon as I've edited this down and stuck this up on the internet. This is the next thing that I'm plugging in and having to play with. What is it? It's a flipping 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. That's what it is. 8 voices in a little module with hardly any knobs. Enough knobs, let me say. So what's it about? The idea of this, which I think is complete genius, is that what do you actually need out of a polysynth? You want some big pads and perhaps a stab kind of sound. And you're really kind of aiming for that same sound all the time. Something which is going to bolster and surround your Euro-Rack, the beeps and the bloops and the lines and the arpeggiators you've got coming out of that. You just want some nice chords in the background. That's what this is about. It's not trying to offer you a massive synthesizer where you have control over every single parameter. That's not its focus. Its focus is to produce fantastic chords and pads. That's what it wants to do. And I think that's brilliant, because that's all I want. That's all I want. Whenever I stick in Euro-Rack over onto my DAW for a bit of mixing, everybody want to add big pad sounds. I do. I mean, that's what I've got a Cobalt 8 and a Modwave for. That's what they tend to come into use for, is to provide those pads. And I'm not going to spend all day trying to design a pad. I just want that paddy sound. Now, I spoke to the guy behind this, obviously, in order for me to obtain one. Send me one. And he was saying that basically he wanted his access virus with his Euro-Rack. He just wanted something which made that paddy sound. That's all he was after, and that's what he's produced in this, which has got a daisy on the back, so that's running the software within it. And then for controls, you've got a bit of envelope, you've got control over the filter, and you've got control over the sort of oscillations that are going on, whether it's unison or polyphonic mode and a bit of detuning. So just the perfect little parameters that you need. There's a couple of different modes and stuff going on, and then you've got a chord memorizer, so you can pump in a bunch of chords and then use CV to step through them. Brilliant. It seems to me to just be the perfect pad synth for my Euro-Rack. Absolutely love it. Now this is only a prototype, it's not the finished thing, but I'm going to hopefully next week release a video on it, just showing what my first thoughts are on it so far, and then they're hoping to release after the summer, in which case maybe I'll do another video on it back then once we get hold of a finished version. But fantastic. I love it already, and I haven't even really, I haven't turned it on. So cool, yeah, next week, check back, and I'll have something on that. Something else I have coming up on the review schedule is a little Euro-Rack system from Wavefonix. Now, I'm really enjoying Wavefonix. I've tried out a few of their modules now. The big Poly 8 VCOs all stuck together. I did a video on that, but I've also got a couple of their filters, and the 2140 low-pass filter is really, really nice. It's been moving me away from the Jove filter, can you believe? I mean, the Jove filter, Jove filter is part of my life, whereas now this 2140 low pass is really there's something juicy and meaty going on in there, which I've not really experienced before, I think. Anyway, they're continuing to release these very vintage inspired, interesting and yet affordable modules, and they've just released a system they're calling the W314, which is an entire modular synthesizer in a small skiff case that's designed for beginners, somebody who wants to get into it for a relatively low cost, but with lots and lots of patching opportunities and a fantastic quality vintage sound to it. Now it comes with 11 modules, including their dual VCO, which is 2 of the same oscillators that are in the Poly 8. You've also got a wavetable digital oscillator in there, which is quite nice. You've got a choice of low-pass filters, envelope generators, LFOs, a choice of dual VCAs, either linear or exponential. You've got a noise generator, ring modulator, multiples, and a mixer to bring the whole thing together. It's all built into a 104 HP case with a power supply, all ready to go and explore with a fistful of patch cables. I hope to have one of these in very soon, and also I'll be doing a video on that possibly also next week, so I think I only get it to have it for a couple of days. The W314 comes in at about just over 1100 quid, which is bloody good value for a Euro-Rack system of that size, that quality, and all complete with a case and power supply. So yeah, very interesting. Now, G-Storm Electro are quite a cool little modular company who produce or have been producing modules based upon old synthesizers. So, an oscillator from an old synth, a filter from an old synth, bits and pieces like that, and putting them into Euro-Rack in useful, affordable little modules. Now, interestingly, G-Storm Electro have done both the filter and the oscillator of the ARP 2600. And it was interesting because the guy from G-Storm put up a post on Facebook after Behringer announced that they were doing the oscillator from the 2600, saying that he's going to discontinue his 2600 oscillator and also his filter, because inevitably Behringer are going to be doing that too. And I was looking at this thinking, well, that's really sad, because Behringer are kind of putting out of business a small boutique maker who's been making these brilliant little modules, and now they're going to mass produce something very similar and undercut his price, and so everyone's going to buy that, and so he no longer really has a market to sell his modules. But the flip side of it was that he said that he's not particularly worried about it, because what it will do is it encourages him to be more innovative and to try other things. Rather than just reproducing something which has already been there, he's going to think about doing other things, more interesting things, different things. And that, perhaps, is a small positive spin on what it is that Behringer is doing to our market. It may be horrible to some degree, it may be awesome to other degrees, but they do talk about how when you disrupt a market like this, when you come in as a mass market player within a boutique space, it can create competition, it can create innovation. And that is true, because here we have an example of that potentially being true, and that's interesting. It just gave me pause for thought, and while I feel very sorry for G-Storm Electro to some degree, I'm also impressed by their attitude and their ability to change. So what have they done? Well, interestingly, they've just released the filter from the SH5, the Roland SH5, kind of almost at the exactly same time that Behringer announced that they are doing the MS5, which is a clone of the Roland SH5. So I don't know whether this was just something they already had coming along, or whether this is part of their change to something more innovative. I don't know. But suffice to say that G-Storm Electro make great little modules, and this is the voltage control filter from the SH5, and it would be great in anybody's rack, I imagine. And I'm really looking forward to whatever it is that they bring next. And I'm really, I'm just really impressed by the way that they're handling this and moving forward with it, and I wish them all the best. Noise Engineering have just released a bunch of plugins absolutely free, which is great. They've done plugins in the past because Noise Engineering make digital Euro-Rack modules, and more recently they've been DSP based, and they've started moving into what it means to be doing a software core of a Euro-Rack module, and actually how you can pull that out and use it in other places. They've done rack extensions for Reason, they've done plugins for Pro Tools, and now they're starting to release more stuff in a more regular VST-AE format, and they've decided to start a beta program where all you've got to do is sign up on the website and you will have access to these plugins for free, which is brilliant. And these plugins are awesome. They are software versions of existing modules that do crazy things while building in extra part to it. So you've not just got an oscillator, you've got an oscillator and an entire synth voice. So they kind of built what they're calling the Varior side, which is the dynamic side, the filter, the VCA, the envelope, that sort of side of the plugin, alongside the oscillating part. So they have sync Varior. I love the linguistic gymnastics I have to go through with Noise Engineering. It's just fantastic. Anyway, this is a simple synthesizer with 3 modes. You've got classic waveforms, percussion and effects all built in there to the sound generation side, and you can also add in 6 phase offset oscillators for a much bigger, wider sound. And then you've got the Varior side, which is, as I say, the envelope and modulation side to it. They've also got Vert Varior as well, which is a very similar idea, but it has a different set of algorithms, and these are actually the algorithms that they punted over to the Arturia Microfreak and their latest update. So it's those oscillators, those algorithms are within the Vert Varior, but put together as a synth plugin all by itself. Now both these plugins look fantastic, well, fantastically trippy. They can either look very standard, or you can turn on the fire and then they just go loopy. Just look amazing. But they have these wonderful waveform displays, so you can see what's going on. The controls are very, very simple, just sliders, but the little tiny sort of bit on the slider gets bigger as you move it from left to right, which is fantastic. I love that. Alongside it, they're also releasing the Ruina, which is a distortion plugin based upon another one of their Euro-Rack modules, which just has acres of different types of distortion, where you can turn the gain up to something like 128 or something crazy. So fantastic. And these are free, so just put pause on the video, go to noiseengineering.us and sign yourself up for an account and get hold of those right now, would be my advice. Right, Behringer. Just the facts. I thought I'd try a different approach to Behringer, rather than like scratching our heads the whole time and talking about this and that and the other thing, and trying to get into deep philosophical discussions about the nature of commerce and marketing and gear and synthesis and how that makes us feel. Behringer did a load of stuff this month. Here's what they did. They did an RD8 Mark II. What? I can't remember what's different. I think they changed the colour of some buttons or something. Is that it? No, honestly, I can't remember what's different. All I know is that my RD8 is now, of course, devalued instantly because there's a Mark II out there with some slight changes and a couple of things that they've improved upon. Probably something to do with sound quality, because, that might be it. In that it's now more authentic than it was. And apparently the original one, right, was bang on authentic. But this is bang on authentic. So so that's nice. They also released the TD3 MO, the modded out version of their TD3 TR303 baseline clone. Are we keeping up? Yeah, it's a 303 clone, but this is the modded out version, which means it has all the modifications that Devilfish have been very kindly and very expensively doing to Roland 303s for years and years and years. So it's a sort of thing like extending the range of the filter, giving more access to controls over envelopes and individual things, putting in what's called a muffler sort of limiter thing, some accent control, some slide, weird other bits and pieces. I've done a whole review of the TD3 MO for Sound on Sound magazine, which should be out next month. I believe I've also got a sound demo up on YouTube, so do go and check that out. On the Euro-Reco side, they released a MIDI to CV converter, which is a useful thing to add to their system of stuff. It's done in the style of the System 5.5 modules that they've done, but to be honest, it's a little bit underwhelming. There's not a whole lot to it. I think you get two outputs, just, pitch and gate, I think was about it. It's just like, oh, I mean, it's cheap, great, but it's not particularly featured. So that's a little bit of a miss, I think. But one thing they have done is they've now started releasing complete Euro-Reco systems. So using their System 5.5 and System 100, they've started to release a curated system. So here's your System 15, and then your System 35, and then your System 5.5, which gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And personally, again, I believe that's what they should have been doing from the start. Talking of vintage and modular, they've also announced their 2500 sequential sequencer thing. Big, I think 3-channel sequencer, 3 lots of 8 knobs on a big chunky module that goes with their 2500 modules. So I'll probably be picking that one up and giving that a look in order to use it with my 2500 modules, which I've lost somewhere. They also announced that they are releasing the VCO from their 2600 as a Euro-Reco module. So taking the oscillator out of their 2600 clone and making it available by itself, which is nice. I mean, it makes sense. I don't see why they wouldn't pull out the oscillator and the filter from those sorts of from all that work that they've done on recreating those synthesizers. Why not translate that into Euro-Reco? That makes some kind of sense to me, I suppose. What doesn't quite make sense is they've taken all of the modulation from the 2600 oscillator and put it into the Euro-Reco format, even though there's nothing to go into it, because on the front of the 2600 you have all of these sliders that bring in signals from other places. It's all hardwired behind the scenes to bring in the LFO and the output of the other oscillator and all sorts of bits and pieces into that oscillator to create modulation opportunities. With the Euro-Reco module, none of those connections are there. Those other oscillators aren't there. That modulation isn't there. The noise, the sample and hold is not there. And so instead they've got like 4 FM inputs, which nobody really needs. And it makes the module unnecessarily wide, which, I don't know, it's just one of those things where you think, oh, they just didn't quite put enough thought into it. And that's a shame. They just need to put a little bit more thought into it, and they may do better, I think, with those sorts of things. But otherwise, of course, it's a great idea. They should do that. Yeah, absolutely. What didn't go down quite so well is their 4-channel quad VCA, which is based entirely on the IntelliGel quad VCA, which is a current existing product. And we're back again in this situation of going, oh, why clone an existing product? Why not do a quad VCA, but just rearrange the front panel differently? I don't understand. Don't understand why you have to make it the same. That doesn't make any sense. Sticking to the facts. Right, moving on then. They got into a bit of a thing of pushing out prototypes this month, and one of the prototypes we saw was the MS5, which is based upon the Roland SH5. So a big, nice, fat, good-looking synthesizer, classic from Roland, which always looked good. I mean, this comes from that era where Roland were just absolutely acing it. They had the System 100, they had the SH101 and the SH5, SH2, other SHs, I think. Anyway, they all looked fantastically futuristic back in the 80s when these things came out. And I don't think they've ever quite captured that era again, ever. But Behringer have gone back, reached for it, grabbed it, brought it in, and it kind of looks great. Another prototype they had up was the Syncussion, the SY1, I think it is, based on the old Pearl Syncussion, which was like, I don't know what it is. It's like some kind of drum machine from way back. 2 channels of drums it had. It made that pew pew sound that we love in disco. We all love disco music, and so it's cool that they're doing that. And it's funny, it doesn't matter what you say, there's always somebody who wants one of these things, because to me it's like, I don't ever see a situation in which I would ever want to play on such a thing. But no, apparently people do, and that's awesome. So they are a Syncussion. I'm sure it'll be great. And finally, it looks like they've teamed up with Vladimir Kuzmin, the originator of the Russian-built Polivox synthesizer. Oh yes, quite interesting. So this is like a legendary godfather of Russian synthesizers has contacted Behringer and said, look, you're making a load of old synths, why don't you make one of mine? I think that would be great. And Behringer have gone, yeah, okay, let's do that. And so they appear to be doing so. Now the Polivox is renowned for its grittiness, I suppose, its instability, its proclivity to just fall apart at any given moment, while at the same time producing awesome fat and gnarly tones. And so Behringer is going to have a go at recreating that sound, that vibe, without hopefully acing the old falling apart as soon as you look at it kind of thing. And finally we have the Revoltech Witch. This little box here. Now this is the thing, I don't know if you watched my Befacco live stream I did a few weeks ago. This was the thing that we weren't sure whether we should talk about or not, because it wasn't quite ready. It was a bit kind of fruity and farty and not making the right sort of noises that one would expect it to. So we made the decision not to talk about it. But we can talk about it now because it's now available. What is it? Well, it's a little synthesizer. Could be a polyphonic synthesizer. It has the OWL DSP in here. Now the OWL platform is something that Revoltech have came up with a fair while ago, which is a programming language or a DSP platform into which you can create whatever you can program, whatever you can come up with, whether it's an effect or oscillators or some kind of utility sequencer, whatever you like. You can program it, create a patch for it, download it onto your OWL pedal, as it was at the time, or OWL Euro-Reco module, and now download it into the Witch, or also the Lich, which is the Befacco sort of redoing of the OWL platform in a module. You then have various modulation inputs and outputs. You've got parameters to control whatever it is that the parameters that you've created of the patch allow you to parameulate. The difficult thing about talking about this is that it can be anything. It's a multifunctional sort of blank canvas of a synthesizer. Now it's going to ship with 8 algorithms built in, or rather 4 algorithms with 2 variations, depending on whether you want to run it as an MPE expressive thing or whether you want to run it as a regular MIDI. And so by default they're giving you, I think, 4 different forms of synthesis. Virtual analog in there, you've got a voice simulator formant synthesizer, you've got morphing wavetables, and you've got a quad sampler. All of those built in by default, but then you've got access to over 300 patches within the OWL patch library that you can overwrite anything that's in here and run your own stuff, whatever you want it to be. Now I've had one a little while, I haven't really got into it yet, I just quite haven't found the time, but I mean to, because this is the sort of thing that I struggle with. DSP based things that can be anything, multifunctional devices where you don't have a knob per function, where knobs can be anything. So this is kind of a challenge to me. This and the Befacco Lich as well, both of them are running the same hardware essentially and can run the same patches. And both of those are something that I want to tackle in some depth in order to try to explore exactly what it is they can do from the perspective of someone who doesn't really like that sort of thing. So that'll give it an interesting spin, won't it, eh? So yeah, that's that. And it's available either built and fully assembled from Revoltech or as a kit from Befacco. So there you are. I hope that was helpful in this month's roundup. If you have any questions or comments, do please drop them in below, because I do like to respond to comments. I like to respond to comments because that's just the kind of distracted person that I am, and I should be getting on doing more interesting things. No, damn it. I will answer every question that anybody ever throws at me. Now, coming up, I have the Polycinematic, as I mentioned. I've also got the Wavefonix W314 to contend with. I have an Elmira distortion module to build, and I have endless possibilities in Euro-Rec wrangling and other stuff along the way that I'd like to bring in a few more ideas on how to do stuff, or how to choose a filter, or differences between sequencers, stuff that's going to be generally helpful, more so perhaps than just individual reviews of individual products. But there's only so much I can do in the time that I have, and I'll see what I can do about that. But if you ever got any ideas about things you would like me to cover or to do, then send me the thing you'd like me to do. Or just drop me a line and I'll see what I can do about it. Please do follow along. There's all sorts of opportunities for subscription and notifications. I'm quite active on Instagram. If you'd like to follow me on there, I'll put the link up here. Otherwise on Facebook, Twitter for the usual kind of general news bits and pieces, but I tend to be a bit more personal on Instagram, if that's of interest to you. If you'd like to support what I do, then please consider things like joining me on Patreon. That's the most direct way that you can support me, because you can throw me a couple of quid every month, and that enables me and emboldens me to make more videos. And also we have that's a good place for chat and direct communication with me, again, if that's something that interests you. Other little things you can do is that I have an affiliate links down in the description. One links to Thomann, where if you just click on that link, go to Thomann and buy stuff, I get a few pennies from whatever it is that you buy. That's useful. I'm also working on one with Perfect Circuit in the US, so you might be able to do that too. So do those things. All of those things help support me and encourage me to make more videos and to keep going at this stuff, because I love this stuff. I love making these videos. I love the engagement that often gives. I love the opportunity to try out new things and to share my thoughts on them. That's wonderful. I love doing that, but it's far from being my day job. And so any support and to enable me to do more of that is very, very helpful and much, much appreciated. And a big shout out to all of my patrons out there who have stuck with me through thick and thin, through lots of times, through lots of videos, and I really do appreciate all their support for however long you've been with me, or however fleeting that support may be. Oh, I forgot to mention live streaming. Normally speaking, after I've released a Molten Monthly, we then get together for a bit of a live stream chat on the Sunday night, to talk about the gear, to plug things in, to drink some beer, and generally just have a nice time together. But I can't do that this weekend, so I will see if I can squeeze it in sometime next week. And if I do, I will make a noise about it, and we can all get together then and have some fun. So that'll do. I hope that was useful, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.